They say envy is the sincerest form of flattery. If that's true, then I was flattered constantly. Women wanted my wardrobe. Men admired my husband. Friends envied our vacations, our homes, our curated life. To the outside world we were the couple. Powerfully poised, effortlessly elegant, and maddeningly untouchable. At 38, I had the kind of resume that looked more like a brag sheet. Harvard Business School. Former McKinsey strategist. Now CEO of a philanthropic foundation that bore my name and my late mother's legacy. I managed global initiatives, served on prestigious boards, and once turned down a job offer from the White House. Twice. I liked order, elegance, and silence in the morning. I drank my coffee black, read 3 newspapers daily, and believed in strategic patience over impulsive emotion. Then there was Jack. Jack Morgan, yes, like the bank, was magnetic in the kind of way you don't notice until it's too late. Tall, broad-shouldered, disarmingly polite. His smile could open doors and disarm enemies. He'd built a boutique private equity firm from the ground up. Quietly ruthless in the boardroom, charmingly devoted at charity galas. People fell in love with his projection, and I admit I once did too. We met at a Davos mixer. I was speaking on global microfinance trends. He was attending with a billionaire tech client. I corrected him on a data point. He asked me out over espresso that same night. 3 months later we were engaged. At the wedding, he whispered that I was the first woman who ever made him nervous. I mistook that for vulnerability. Now I know it was performance. Together we built an empire. Or at least that's what everyone called it. We split our time between a glass estate in Malibu, a brownstone in Manhattan, and a lakeside villa in Lake Como. We had a Gulfstream 4, an in-house chef, a PR team, and security on retainer. Jack joked that he couldn't tell if I ran a charity or a shadow government. I pretended not to notice how often he locked his phone screen when I entered a room. We hosted senators, celebrities, and socialites. Christmas parties that made page 6. Summer weekends on borrowed yachts. People often said I had it all, and I would nod graciously, letting them believe it. But here's what they didn't see. Jack never asked how my day was. He didn't know the name of my assistant, or that I had quietly funded 3 women's shelters in the last year alone. He was good at gestures, a Cartier necklace here, a handwritten note there, but not presence, not intention. He loved my image more than my person. I knew it. I just thought I could live with it. After all, I had my independence, my work, and my control. Or so I believed. It would be a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks before our 12th anniversary, when I would stumble upon the first clue that my perfect life was a perfectly crafted illusion. And in that moment, I stopped being his wife, and became his quiet, calculating opponent. It started, like most betrayals do, with something mundane. I was in Jack's home office, ours technically, sorting through quarterly financials for our joint foundation. Our accountant had requested some backup documentation, and Jack's inbox was the fastest route. He trusted me with access. Or rather, he never expected I'd look too closely. The email wasn't even labeled anything suspicious. It sat innocuously between a wine shipment receipt and a board meeting agenda. Subject line: draft review. It was from a law firm I recognized. One Jack had once joked was so aggressive they scared hedge fund managers. I opened it on instinct, not suspicion. The thread spanned weeks. In it, Jack was coordinating a divorce strategy. Not hypothetically. Not with hesitation. With cold, deliberate precision. He wanted to file quietly in late spring, when I'd be traveling for our Southeast Asia initiative. He discussed ways to characterize me as non-essential to our joint ventures. In one particularly icy line, his lawyer suggested leveraging my public philanthropic profile to argue I was a figurehead, not an operator. Jack replied, "Exactly. She's smart, sure, but not financially sophisticated. Trophy wife with a better vocabulary." I didn't breathe for several seconds. My hands were steady, but something inside me cracked, quick and clean like the snap of fine porcelain. I should have confronted him. marched into whatever overpriced meeting he was in and thrown the computer at his head. But something held me back. Curiosity, strategy, fury, all of it sharpened me. Instead, I dug deeper. I navigated to our cloud server, the one tied to our family office. I knew Jack had a habit of using his personal folder for anything sensitive, smug in the belief that encrypted labels made things invisible. They didn't. Not to someone who'd audited Fortune 100 security systems in a past life. What I found made my skin go cold. There were spreadsheets, dozens, timelines for asset reallocation, diagrams showing how he planned to restructure our shared holdings, strategies to dilute my ownership, funnel profits through shell entities, and reclassify key assets as separate property. He had even begun rewriting trust documents, positioning his brother, as a successor trustee in case of marital dispute. There was a plan to reduce my voting rights on our board. Another to move a high-value Cayman account just days before filing. It was meticulous, almost impressive, and utterly devastating. But what hit hardest wasn't the financial betrayal. It was the realization that he'd been planning this for months, while smiling at me across candlelit dinners, while kissing my cheek at charity events, while calling me his better half during a televised gala speech. It had all been theater. Every kind gesture, every lingering glance, a calculated act. And I had applauded it like a fool. That night I poured myself a glass of scotch. No tears. I sat in the den, Jack's favorite room, all leather and masculine warmth, and stared out over the Manhattan skyline. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why. I started making lists. Contacts, lawyers, asset managers I trusted more than he did. I reviewed documents from our prenup, revised after our 10th anniversary. I studied his spreadsheets like a general reading the enemy's battle plan. Let him think he had the upper hand. If Jack wanted a divorce, fine. The first rule of war is to know your enemy. The second is to let them underestimate you. Jack thought I'd break down. He thought I'd go numb, maybe call a therapist or a yoga retreat. What he didn't count on was that I had once built mergers bigger than our marriage. I'd buried empires with a spreadsheet. And I'd never been more focused than when I was quietly, surgically preparing to win. I started with Elena. We met freshman year at Harvard. She was brilliant, sarcastic, terrifyingly good with tax codes, and now a partner at a white-glove Manhattan firm that specialized in generational wealth protection. We hadn't talked in months, but when I called her and said, "I need you," off the record, she cleared her calendar in 15 minutes. Over dinner at a private backroom in Tribeca, I laid it out. No drama, no tears, just facts. She listened, nodded, sipped her wine and said, "You're going to want Walter." Waltering, a retired forensic accountant who now consulted for divorce attorneys when things got ugly. He had the demeanor of a sleepy grandfather and the instincts of a bloodhound. The kind of man who could find money in a shoebox 3 continents away. Last was Eric, a cybersecurity expert I'd met through a board initiative on digital privacy. Mid-30s, socially awkward, brilliant. He once hacked a Fortune 50 CEO's phone to prove a point during a talk on digital vulnerabilities. I told him I needed to secure everything. Discreetly. He didn't ask questions. Just handed me a USB drive and said, "Plug this in once. I'll do the rest." The operation began that night. With Elena's help, I created a new LLC under a Nevada trust. Fully legal, totally private. We moved certain liquid assets into the LLC, starting with the ones Jack wouldn't immediately notice. A few brokerage accounts, a secondary art collection in storage, shares in our quietest venture funds. Next came the trust. Years ago, we'd established a series of family trusts for tax efficiency. Jack hadn't counted on the clause we added, at my insistence, allowing for amendments with a single trustee vote. That vote was mine. I rewrote the beneficiary allocations, removing Jack's control over disbursements and naming a foundation in my name as secondary recipient. The houses were trickier. Technically, we owned them jointly. But the Malibu property and the Como villa were under shell companies, both of which had been dormant. I restructured them, naming new directors, people loyal to me, pulled from past ventures, old allies. Then, I created a holding company that acquired the shells. The properties didn't move. But the control, that changed hands quietly, legally, and completely. The family office board came next. Jack had packed it with his people over the years. I had tolerated it, always one step behind. But now I moved fast. One director resigned, after I reminded her of a past conflict of interest that would go public if necessary. Another accepted a promotion to a subsidiary board. Within 4 days, I'd replaced 3 out of 5 seats with individuals I trusted absolutely. Through it all I played my part. At dinners I laughed at Jack's jokes. Asked about his meetings. I wore the necklace he gave me for our anniversary. I booked a couple's massage and let him believe the routine was intact. I even initiated sex once, on a Thursday night after wine and truffle pasta. He seemed surprised, flattered. I made it last just long enough to convince him I was still emotionally tethered. Then I slipped into the bathroom and stared at my reflection in the mirror, skin flushed, stomach hollow, mind racing with everything he didn't know. I maintained the illusion meticulously. Smiles at brunch, hand on his arm at fundraisers, casual mentions of our summer plans in front of mutual friends. He thought he was controlling the narrative, prepping for a clean, self-serving divorce while keeping up appearances. What he didn't see was that I was bleeding him out, one signature at a time. Eric kept me updated. Jack's emails showed no sign of suspicion. Walter flagged one movement, a bank transfer Jack initiated to an offshore account. We flagged it, documented it, then let it go through. It would be useful later. By the end of the 6th day, the structure of our empire had quietly shifted. On paper, Jack still looked like the king. But in practice, I held the crown. He just didn't know it yet. And when he finally filed, when he made his move thinking I'd crumble, he was going to realize he wasn't walking into a divorce. He was walking into an ambush. But he was going to find out exactly how dangerous a trophy wife with a vocabulary could be. It happened in Aspen. We had flown in the night before on the jet, like always. Snow had just started to fall. Soft, silent, pristine. Jack loved Aspen in winter. Said it made him feel clean. Ironic, considering what was coming. He was strangely attentive that morning. Made my coffee. Told me I looked beautiful in his college sweatshirt, the one I wore when I didn't feel like trying. I should have known then. Jack never gave without an agenda. It was just after 10 a.m. when he walked into the living room holding a manila envelope. His expression was composed, almost serene, like he'd rehearsed it in front of a mirror. "Ivy," he said, "can we talk?" I looked up from my laptop, heart pounding, though I already knew what was inside that envelope. Still I let my eyes widen. "Of course," I said. He sat across from me, hands folded like a politician. "This isn't easy," he began with that familiar CEO cadence. "But I've been doing a lot of thinking. About us. About where we're headed." I nodded, swallowing. Just enough to make it believable. "I think it's time we move forward. Separately." He placed the envelope on the table like it was a peace offering. "This doesn't have to be messy. I want it to be respectful. Civil." My fingers trembled just a little. "What is this?" "A draft agreement," he said gently. "I've already spoken to a lawyer. You'll see the terms are generous." Generous. That word sat in the air like smoke. I opened the envelope slowly, staring down at the papers as if I hadn't already read them days ago in a hidden folder on his cloud drive. He was offering me the Manhattan brownstone, half the liquid assets, and a payout spread over 5 years. The properties, the trusts, the equity, all under his control. I blinked hard, let a tear slide down my cheek. "I don't understand," I whispered. He reached for my hand. "You're amazing, Ivy. Truly. But we've grown apart. This is best for both of us. We can still be friends. If we handle this like adults." I let him hold my hand. I nodded slowly as if stunned. I need time. Of course, he said, squeezing it. Take a few days. Think about the offer. I watched him walk out of the room, smug and satisfied, thinking he'd pulled it off, thinking I was broken, defeated, dazed by the blow. But the moment the door closed, I wiped my face, stood up, and crossed the room to where I'd hidden a second phone. Dialed Elena. He filed, I said. On the other end, she didn't miss a beat. Then we go, she replied. I looked out at the mountains. The snow was still falling. Beautiful, cold, and quiet, just like what was coming. Jack had played his hand. Now it was time for mine. It unraveled faster than I expected. 2 days after Jack filed, his world began to shrink. Quietly at first, a phone call here, an unusual alert there. Then swiftly, like a series of dominoes, he never saw me line up. It began with his financial advisor. Jack was in New York, seated across from Richard Price, a stiff old-school banker who'd managed his wealth for over a decade. Jack trusted him, foolishly so. I had anticipated that. When Jack demanded an update on our joint liquidity positions and the family trust distributions, Richard's expression reportedly tightened. Jack, he said carefully, there's been some reorganization. Many of the accounts are no longer under your authority. What the hell are you talking about? Jack asked, voice rising. Richard slid over a packet of updated structure charts, bland-looking pages with devastating implications. Multiple accounts had been consolidated under a newly formed LLC, controlled entirely by me. The board of our family office had approved it. Legally. Efficiently. Without his consent, because it wasn't required. The art fund. Jackass. Moved, Richard said. Under the new foundation structure Ivy initiated. Her signature was sufficient. You signed off on that clause 3 years ago. The real estate holding companies. Also under the foundation's board. Which she now chairs. Jack's voice reportedly dropped to a whisper. The Jet. Richard simply said. Her name's on the holding title. Jack left the meeting in a rage, phone in hand, dialing attorneys before he even hit the street. But it only got worse from there. His lawyer confirmed it. The Malibu estate. Transferred legally through trust restructuring. The Lake Como villa. Owned by a shell company. One that now reported to a foundation board of my choosing. He tried to call in favors, call meetings, even threatened to sue Elena for fraud. It was useless. Every move had been legal. Every document signed. Every clause traceable. By the time he returned to Aspen that weekend, Jack was a man unraveling. He stormed into the house like a thundercloud. I was sitting by the fire with tea, casually reading a book. You think this is funny? He snapped, eyes wild. What the hell did you do? I looked up calmly. Come in, Jack. Warm up. You look cold. He threw a thick folder onto the coffee table. His printouts, his panic, all of it in black and white. You've stolen millions in assets. Moved property. Changed boards. You had no right. Closed my book gently. Actually, I had every right. All of it's legal. Every move documented. Every signature authenticated. His face flushed. You manipulated the trusts. That's smart, I cut in. It was smart. Not manipulative. You signed the clauses. You underestimated me. That's not theft, Jack. That's strategy. He paced like a caged animal. This is war, Ivy. You have no idea what you've started. I do, I said, standing. I started protecting myself the moment I found your little email exchange with your lawyer. You remember? The one where you called me a trophy wife with a better vocabulary. He froze. I saw it. The flicker of confusion followed by understanding, then fear. You knew, he said slowly. For a week before you served me. Just enough time. He lunged toward the counter, snatching up a tablet and scrolling furiously. You can't just take it all. I didn't take it. I moved what was already mine. Funds from accounts I contributed to. Properties I had legal leverage over. You assumed I wouldn't notice. You assumed I wouldn't fight. His voice cracked. This isn't over. It is, I said gently, walking toward him, setting a fresh folder on the counter. And if you try to drag this out, I'll make it worse. He eyed the folder. What's that? Copies of your emails. Between you and your assistant. You know, the ones that confirm your affair started 2 years ago while she was still on our foundation payroll. His mouth opened, then closed. There's also a brief memo on the offshore account you moved funds into from a Cayman shell corporation. Walter flagged it. The transaction violates federal disclosure requirements. Shall I go on? You wouldn't, he whispered. I tilted my head. Jack, I wouldn't need to, unless you make this ugly. Settle quietly. Look away. You can keep the brownstone, your private accounts, your dignity. Or you can fight, and lose more than money. He stared at me, and for the first time in years I saw it. Not the charm. Not the arrogance. But the truth. He was afraid. You're not the woman I married, he said softly. No, I agreed. I'm the woman you thought you could destroy. He left 2 hours later. No parting words. No threats. Just a hollow silence where his swagger used to be. The snow outside was beginning to melt. I poured myself another cup of tea, returned to my book, and smiled for the first time in weeks. Checkmate. In the end I gave him something. Not out of pity, God no. But because even a king stripped of his kingdom needs a corner of land to bow out with grace. Jack got a fraction. Less than 5% of our estate. Just enough to call it amicable in the press. His lawyers tried, of course. Last-minute bluffs. Passive-aggressive language about entitlement and mutual contributions. But they knew better than to push. The documents I held in reserve, affairs, offshore tax avoidance, misuse of charitable funds, never had to see the light of a courtroom. That was the real gift I gave him. Silence. He moved out of the brownstone within the week. No grand goodbye. No parting speeches. Just a text from his assistant confirming the movers would arrive, between 10 and 2. The man who once orchestrated hostile takeovers now reduced to slotting himself into a delivery window. His reputation didn't collapse overnight, but it frayed around the edges. Slowly. Speaking engagements dried up. Board appointments stopped renewing. A few whispers about financial restructuring circulated, vague enough not to scandalize but sharp enough to sting. Meanwhile I moved forward. I tightened my hold on the family office, reshaped the foundation into something leaner, more purpose-driven. No more galas for clout. We funded clean water initiatives in sub-Saharan Africa, underwrote STEM scholarships for girls, partnered with mental health nonprofits in underserved communities. Real impact. No cameras. For the first time in years I felt unburdened. Not just by Jack's exit, but by the armor I'd worn in that marriage. Always polished, always pleasing. I no longer smiled because I was expected to. I smiled because I wanted to. The brownstone felt too quiet at first. Then it felt like mine. I filled the silence with music I loved and books I'd put off reading. I learned to cook again, badly, joyfully. I stopped checking my reflection in the mirror for signs of fatigue or fading youth. I had earned every freckle, every fine line. I was no longer a curated version of myself. Eventually I booked a one-way ticket to Paris. No entourage, no headlines. Just me, a carry-on, and a list of art exhibits I'd always meant to see. Now, I sit on a narrow balcony overlooking the Seine. The city hums below, dusk settling like silk over the rooftops. A bottle of Bordeaux rests beside me, half full. My phone buzzes on the table. A message from Elena. Final papers filed. It's done. I read it twice, then power off the phone and set it aside. The moment doesn't need to be shared or announced. Just is. I raise my glass to the horizon. The lights of Paris flicker to life, one by one. To survival. To strategy. To starting over. I sip slowly, breathing in the dusk and the wine and the quiet power of being free. And I smile. Not because I won. Because I never needed him to. The envelope arrived in Paris, forwarded from my New York address with no return label. Heavy for its size. Handwritten. Precise. Inside, a single flash drive and a small ivory card. No logo. No embellishments. Just a line in sharp black ink. I wasn't the only one he betrayed. Call me. E. I stared at it for a long time. Not Elena. She never signed anything with just an initial. And certainly not in that script. Bold, confident, unfamiliar. I turned the drive over in my hand, noting the subtle emblem etched into the plastic. Discreet. Expensive. Government grade. Carefully, I plugged it into a burner laptop I kept for things exactly like this. Files loaded instantly. Encrypted folders. Redacted documents. Names I recognized barely. Foundations Jack had insisted we avoid. Investments he'd vetoed without explanation. People he claimed had burned him in the past. And beneath it all, something deeper. Hidden accounts. Patterns. He hadn't just tried to betray me. He'd been playing a longer, darker game. I closed the laptop slowly, leaned back in my chair, and stared out at the Paris skyline. I had ended one war. But maybe, just maybe, another was beginning.